Hello, hello. It's time for a cozy morning talk about horror. I'm still in my clown pajamas. Let's go. So today I want to talk about the best mass market horror fiction I have on my shelves. And so for this to qualify in my heart, it needed to be mass market, a mass market paperback on my shelves. So that meant that even though I love things like Exquisite Corpse and the Inhuman Condition, these are not mass market. This is a hardcover. This is a regular paperback. So mass market, 20th century, mostly this is mostly 20th century horror. I think one or two of these might actually be early 21st century. Most of the the first I'm going to talk about is, but most of these are from like the 80s or somewhere around there. So we're talking things like the Stephen King era, early Stephen King era, but all my Stephen King is in hardcover. I don't keep Stephen King if it's not in hardcover for the most part. So there's no Stephen King on here. Also, we've all talked about Stephen King a million times. I also try to keep it to at least maximum one book per author. So even though like all of my Richard Lehman is a mass market paperback, I'm only going to talk about one Richard Lehman book. So let's start. First up, the first book I have to talk to you about is the one that's from 2006, and that is The Ruins by Scott Smith. This is from 2006, but it really does have a lot of that same feel and love to it that the 20th century horror I'm talking about does. The Ruins follows a group of stupid American tourists as they're in Mexico and they decide to go on this hike to go find the brother of somebody that they're staying with. When they get there, they find that the natives of the land will not let them leave once they step into this certain area, and that's because the vines are going to eat and kill them. It's great. This one does have the trope that it's like the one horror thing that will always get me. It will always get me is when a character thinks that there's something inside of them and they need to cut it out. This happens in The Ruins. It happens in The Troop, which I have in trade paperback, so I'm not going to talk about The Troop. And it always gets me. It's always my favorite character that happens to. The Ruins is great. It's a chunky motherfucker. It's so fun. It's so fun. The characters are stupid. Normally with these books, we don't really care about the characters. We care about just the blood and the gore and stuff like that. The Ruins is great. I do have a short story collection. This short story collection just blew my mind. Honestly, when I read it, I wasn't expecting it to be half as good as it was. It's all zombie stories. It's the Book of the Dead. The first one, they did make a second one. This is edited by John Skipp and Craig Spector. There's Stephen King's in here, Robert R. McCammon, Lehman's in here, everything like that. For the most part, I'm going to say most of these stories, like 90% of them, were awesome. They were so great. We've got there's lots of zombie sex in here. Like, don't go into this expecting it to not have lots of zombie sex, because Richard Lehman has a story in here. So, obviously Stephen King's story is very good, just objectively speaking. My favorite one was probably Less Than Zombie, which is a parody of Bryce Nelson's Less Than Zero. And Bryce Nelson is another person I'm not talking about today, because I don't have any of his books in mass market paperback, even though I do count Glamorama and The Shards as a full-on horror novels. But no, this is great. It's a great chunk of zombie fiction. I heard that the second one is not near as good, probably because they had all the heavy hitters in this one. But no, oh Jesus. Great collection of zombie stories. They're all real gross. After that, I have a bunch of David Robbins. David Robbins, he's right back there next to my Harry Potter books. So I had to pick my favorite David Robbins. And so what I picked the first one I ever read that made me continue to go out and buy more and more David Robbins. That is Halloween. This book is nuts. Okay, so some of Robbins is like hit or miss. So like some of his books I've just kept because I'm kind of a completionist in that way. Halloween is about this group of awful teenagers who go and they decide they're gonna like go caving or something. One of them is like just a nerd and the rest of them are going to spend their time just tormenting him. Unfortunately, there are these large devil creatures in this cave, and they want to rape and kill them. So much is happening all the time. And it's just so pulpy and gross. And I love it so much. It's fantastic. It's so fun. It is so goddamn fun. I love it. It's fantastic. It's so fun. He's written other books I have enjoyed. Some of his other books, The Wrath, especially. I love The Wrath. The Wrath had no bones, no business, which is my new favorite line to say ever. But Halloween was my favorite. It was just like the name sounds so pulpy and stupid. Halloween, it's great. It's great. All right, next I've got some young adult horror. In this one, I had to go again. I had to pick from what I kept. So I read a lot of this author's book. I've read him since I was 7. But I decided to go. I was kind of thinking between this one and Chain Letter. But then again, like Chain Letter is just more tragic to me and like horrific. And eventually I ended up going with Whisper of Death by Christopher Pike. So Whisper of Death. Whisper of Death, I think, is where Christopher Pike does do his best, where he does get to dabble a little bit in the spiritual stuff that he really likes to dabble in, but he also has a lot of the really gross out stuff that I think he's really good at. So it follows this teenage couple, and the girl is pregnant. And so what they do is they decide to go and get an abortion because they're like, we can't have this baby right now. When they get back, nobody's there except for a handful of other teenagers. And eventually they figure out that the one thing that all of these teenagers have in common is that they all had something to do with this girl who killed herself recently. And then they all start dying off in horrific ways. I read this book when I was 7 and it changed my life. It's a great time. After that, I do have my one Richard Lehman that I picked, and it really wasn't a question. Like, Richard Lehman writes a lot of really pulpy, gross stuff, and I've really enjoyed a lot of his books. I could talk about Come Out Tonight. I could talk about One Rainy Night. I could talk about all those things, but really what always really hits me, right? I've read this book twice, and both times I've just loved the hell out of it, and that is In the Dark by Richard Lehman. In the Dark has everything. Oh my God. It's another big one. It follows this small town librarian that she sees herself as kind of doughy and plain, and she doesn't have much going on. But one night she does find this, when she's closing up the library, she finds this envelope that leads her to a book, and when she leaves the book, she gets money. And this money keeps doubling, and she keeps getting asked to do like crazier and crazier stuff. Like, it starts out fairly tame, like she has to climb a statue and stuff like that. So like dangerous stuff she probably wouldn't do without this money, but it's not straight up illegal like she gets to do later stuff. And I just, between the absolutely useless love interest, his name is Brace, like brace yourself. What the fuck's going on with Brace? It's fantastic. Cannibalistic, crazy sex slave women in a crazy house that's like, this house is not like, it's not like a major plot, like this is just something else that was going on. Like, it's insane. The ending is just like, oh, and the way that this woman like develops and everything, it's so good. It's so good. It's so crazy. It's off the rails. In the Dark is my favorite Richard Lehman book, and it, like, the first year I read it, when it was my first, it was like one of my top 5 favorite books of the year. I love In the Dark so much. After that, we've got a book, like, this author, like, dropped this fucking book on us, and he disappeared, and he has not written anything else, at least not in this capacity, and that's Bad Moon Rising by Jonathan Kirsch. I read this book fairly recently, I think, in November. I read this book in November, and then I looked like, okay, I gotta read more of this guy's books, like, because this is insane, and he hasn't written any other horror novel. I'm like, what the fuck, like, Jonathan, you cannot drop this on us and just dip like that. Oh my God. Like, this follows the murder of this this family, and it is apparently based on like a real life murder of a real life family. I thought it was a Manson thing based on the fact that Helter Skelter horror, but it's not a Manson thing. It's like I think they're the OT murders. I'll put the name up on the screen. But after this murder, where they're trying to figure out who killed these people, because there was one survivor because she was a college student, she lived at home. And there's also this group of like college students, and there's like 3 of them, and one of them is just kind of pathetic, and he's just, I feel a lot of sadness in my heart for what's his name. I think it was, I guess it was Zach. Yeah, it's Zach. It smells good. There's just such like weird, it's just like the vibe of this book is just like real, just like dirty and gross, and it's just great. It's great. After that, I've got another very famous author. We've got Jack Ketchum. I've got The Girl Next Door. I read 2 books by Jack Ketchum. The other one was The Lost. And I really enjoyed both of them. Ketchum he did a lot. He did a lot. The Girl Next Door is again based on a real true crime case. It's based off of the Sylvia Likens case, and it's harrowing. It's a lot to read. I mean, it is definitely it's harsh. And there's a lot of stuff to go into before you go into this book. But it's definitely, I mean, Ketchum is one of the earlier. He's one of the kind of like 80s like kings of splatterpunk. I don't like to call 80s splatterpunk extreme horror because in my heart, the splatterpunk stuff like Ketchum and Lehman, they've got a certain quality that modern extreme horror just doesn't have. And Poppy Z. Brite too. She's definitely more like there's more feeling to it. I feel like the current trend in modern extreme horror is to be so clinical in your descriptions because you want the reader to see everything that's going on that you forget to inject any feeling into it. And it's like it doesn't matter what's happening to these people if we don't care about them. You can write about the most depraved shit on the planet and people go like, ew, but it doesn't matter if there's no feeling behind it. And that's something that the 80s splatterpunk authors really had in space. Like, they know how to put the feeling behind it, especially in a book like The Girl Next Door. The Girl Next Door is all feeling about it. He straight up refuses to tell you what happens in like the most extreme scenes. But it's more harrowing than something by like Aaron Beauregard or Mika Watson because there's feeling there. The reason he's not telling you is because the character doesn't want to, and that's something that modern extreme horror is lacking, is there's no goddamn character. Anyway, The Girl Next Door is very harrowing, and please look it up before you read it if you're sensitive to stuff like the Sylvia Likens case, because it's real harsh. Anyway, this next one is more of a paranormal. It's kind of sexy. It's like a precursor to like our dark vampire romance things. It is Voice of the Blood by Jemiah Jefferson, which is a vampire. It's a romance. It's bloody though. Like, here's the thing. This is an erotic horror novel. There's a lot going on. Again, with the feeling. There's some feeling here. You do get, I started to care about the characters. I know there were some at the end who ended up getting, like they died. Like there was an issue with that. And I was sad about that because I cared about the characters. There's definitely a lot of sex in here. It's definitely more like something like this, which I'm currently reading right now. There's then, like your traditional anything about horror, but I did want to mention it because I think it's great. It's a series. I've read the first book. I own the second and the third book. I haven't read them yet. But yeah, Voice of the Blood. Looking for some romance in there. Then another kind of, this one did get a Paperbacks from Hell re-release. So this is a mass market paperback, but it is a lot newer than the other ones I've been showing you. And that is Let's Go Play at the Adams by Mendel W. Johnson. This is one of Grady Hendrix's Paperbacks from Hell. I forgot. I was about to talk about how I feel a certain kinship with Grady Hendrix because he and I are some of the only two people that have reviewed a lot of these mass market horror paperbacks, including the Horoscope books. And I realized I forgot to grab The Revenge of Taurus, which is the second Horoscope book. It is the only one I really liked. I didn't read the first one. I read 2 through 4. And this one has a swimming pool full of acid. That's all I'm going to say about it because I forgot about it. Anyway, this is about a group of kids. I think the oldest is maybe like 16, who kidnap and torture babysitter over a period of days. And this did get a lot of, when that was re-released, especially a lot of people were like, don't read, this book is so horrifying. People burned it. People hate it. There's worse out there. And I do think, like, this is definitely, there's a lot of feelings into it. It is harrowing at points. But don't be scared of it. And finally, I want to kind of finish this off with a classic. I'm not talking about something like The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby. I've read both those books. They're both fine books. They're both great. The Exorcist actually did kind of surprise me with how bloody, how vulgar it was. I'm not going to talk about Psycho because I haven't read Psycho yet. I haven't read it yet. What I'm going to talk about is a classic. It's a book you may have read in 9th grade. It's a book that has been masquerading for years and years and years as a literary classic when it is really a real bloody 50s horror novel. It's Lord of the Flies, my man. I love Lord of the Flies. I have loved Lord of the Flies since I was 14 years old and in ninth grade, and we had to read for English class, and then I subsequently went on Tumblr and fanfiction.net and made the best internet friend I've ever made. Wrote the first novel-length thing of my life, was a Lord of the Flies fanfiction. It was 50,000 words. I love Lord of the Flies. I love it so much. Lord of the Flies is the classic tale, good versus evil. We got a kid in there who kills another kid with a big rock. We got a group of kids who savagely beat a child to death with barely sharpened sticks. It's great. And one thing that I did recently reread Lord of the Flies, and one thing that I think really hit me this time was just how, like, you can tell this author, Golding, was 100% an elementary school teacher. Like, this is how boys talk to each other. Like, as a current elementary school teacher, he got that right on. Like, it would, like, the characterization was, like, perfect. I am releasing this coming year. It might be out by now, depending on when this video goes up. I'll put a picture of it up as is. A horror novel, a more explicit horror novel that is based on Lord of the Flies, and is called Guillaume. And I would encourage you to go check it out. So yeah. These are my favorite mass market horror paperbacks that I do have on my shelves. Obviously, there's not all the horror books that I love that I have on my shelves. I have, like, obviously all my Stephen King is in hardcover. Obviously, I showed you these at the beginning. I've got The Troop, stuff like that. But these are the mass markets. Some of these books are out of print. Some of these books are hard to find. But you know where I found some of them? You know where I found books like this? Lots of mass market paperbacks. Horror paperbacks on eBay. That's where they are. That's where you can find books like Bad Moon Rising. And a lot of them are going to be terrible. A lot of them are going to be real shitty. But there are the gems in there. And those gems are books like this. But yes, that is all for today. I will talk to you later. And goodbye.